Zexathara had infiltrated a dozen worlds for the Covenant Intelligence Division, but none had prepared her for this assignment. Her biosynthetic human form trembled as she crouched behind twisted metal debris, watching the impossible unfold before her compound eyes hidden beneath artificial flesh. The mission briefing had been straightforward. Observe human military capabilities during their civil conflict on Kepler 442b, assess their technological threats, and report back to the Hegemony Council. Humans were supposed to be a primitive species, barely capable of interstellar flight. The Covenant had been monitoring their expansion for decades, preparing for the inevitable annexation of their territories. But the intelligence reports had been catastrophically wrong. Zexathara adjusted her camouflaged recording equipment as another squad of human soldiers moved through the rubble-strewn street below. These weren't the undisciplined savages described in the briefings. Every movement was calculated, every gesture, part of an intricate tactical dance she was only beginning to comprehend. The two human factions had been fighting over this colony world for 8 months. Standard Covenant doctrine suggested such a conflict would have devolved into chaos by now, with massive civilian casualties and infrastructure collapse. Instead, Zexathara witnessed something that defied every xenobiological profile in their databases. A medic from the Eastern Coalition sprinted across open ground under heavy fire to reach a wounded soldier. But as she knelt beside the fallen human, Zexathara's enhanced hearing caught something that made her blood freeze. The wounded soldier wore the uniform of the opposing Western Alliance. The medic didn't hesitate. She applied combat stims and emergency biofoam while her own squad provided covering fire, treating an enemy with the same urgency she would show her own people. Through her scope, Zexathara watched the medic's lips move in what her translation software identified as words of comfort. This was impossible. Covenant species fought wars of extermination. Mercy was weakness. Compassion was evolutionary suicide. Days passed and the observations grew more disturbing. Human forces on both sides established safe corridors for civilian evacuation, often exposing themselves to enemy fire to maintain these humanitarian routes. They'd created field hospitals marked with red crosses that both factions respected, even when those hospitals treated soldiers from opposing armies. Zexathara documented it all, her reports growing increasingly frantic. The Hegemony Council needed to understand what they were facing. The breaking point came during the Battle of New Jakarta's Industrial District. Western Alliance forces had cornered an Eastern Coalition platoon in a collapsed manufacturing plant. Standard tactics dictated orbital bombardment or chemical weapons to flush them out. Instead, the Western commander did something that would haunt Zexathara's dreams for years to come. He walked into the open, weaponless, carrying a white flag. Through her audio pickups, she heard his voice echo across the battlefield. "There are civilians trapped in the lower levels. My engineers estimate the building won't survive another bombardment. We're calling a temporary ceasefire to get them out." The Eastern Coalition commander emerged from cover, also unarmed. The two enemies stood face to face in the smoking ruins, and instead of fighting, they began coordinating a rescue operation. For 6 hours, soldiers who had been trying to kill each other worked side by side, pulling survivors from the wreckage. A Western Alliance soldier carried an Eastern Coalition child to safety. An Eastern Coalition engineer guided Western forces through unstable sections of the building. When the last civilian was evacuated, the commanders shook hands, returned to their positions, and resumed trying to kill each other with the same professional efficiency they'd shown in saving lives. Zexathara's hands shook as she transmitted her final report. She'd come to spy on a primitive species preparing for annexation. Instead, she'd discovered something terrifying and beautiful that challenged everything the Covenant understood about. Warfare, about civilization, about the nature of intelligence itself. Humans didn't just fight wars. They fought them with rules, with honor, with a bizarre commitment to preserving the very thing they were supposedly trying to destroy, their own humanity. The response from the Hegemony Council was swift and decisive. Operation Bright Harvest was indefinitely postponed. The planned invasion fleet was reassigned to the rimward sectors. Official records listed the human territories as under extended observation. But Zexathara knew the truth. The Covenant, masters of 100 worlds, conquerors of a dozen species, had encountered something they'd never faced before. An enemy they weren't sure they could afford to defeat. As her extraction ship departed Kepler 442b, Zexathara watched the human colony shrink below. The war would continue for another 3 months before ending in a negotiated settlement that saw both factions sharing governance of the world. No victor, no vanquished, just 2 groups of humans who'd decided they could accomplish more together than apart. In her final classified addendum, buried deep in Covenant intelligence archives, Zexathara wrote, "Recommend extreme caution in future human contact. This species wages war the way others make peace. They are dangerous, not because they cannot be defeated, but because defeating them might destroy the very thing that makes victory worth having. They have weaponized their own conscience, and I fear it may be contagious." She'd come to spy on humans at war. Now she wished she'd never arrived because some knowledge once gained changes you forever. And late at night, in the privacy of her quarters, Zexathara found herself wondering, what if the humans were right?